Welcome to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, hosted by me, Zibby Owens. It's an award-winning podcast with over 1,900 episodes, all featuring authors of books you love and those you have yet to discover. Listen daily 5 times a week. Then go to zibbymedia.com and learn more about what the LA Times called the Zibbyverse. Zibby Media includes Zibby's Bookshop, an independent bookstore in Santa Monica, Zibby Books Publishing, Zibby Retreats, Zibby's Book Club, and more. Go check it out at zibbymedia.com and follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens. It'll take you where you need to go. Thanks for listening. Alice Hoffman is the author of When We Flew Away, a novel of Anne Frank, before the diary. Alice is a repeat guest on this podcast, and I'm delighted to have her back. Alice is the highly acclaimed author of over 30 novels for readers of all ages, including The Dove Keepers, The World That We Knew, which was the winner of the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, The Marriage of Opposites, Practical Magic, Incantation, The Foretelling, and most recently, The Invisible Hour. Her previous novels for Scholastic Press are Aquamarine, which was made into a major motion picture, Indigo, Green Witch, and Green Angel, which Publishers Weekly in a star review called Achingly Lovely. She lives outside of Boston. Welcome, Alice. Thanks so much for coming back on Moms No Time to Read Books. So excited to discuss When We Flew Away, a novel of Anne Frank before the diary. Oh my gosh, so moving, so good. I really love this. I learned so many things I didn't know about Anne Frank and her family. Really amazing. Congrats. What inspired this book?
Thank you so much, Zibby. It's so nice to see you again. It's been a while. You know, really, Anne Frank was a huge inspiration for me to become a writer, and has been since the time I'm 12. But really, what happened was Scholastic came to me, and it was their idea to do a book before the diary because their feeling was that Anne was being forgotten, and that not that many people were reading about her. Not as many people were reading the diary, which I think was true. And so that the goal we had together was that after somebody finished reading this book, whether they were a child or an adult, they would want to then go and read the diary.
Interesting. And gosh, so then how much of this was fictionalized? How much did you have to do research? I mean, obviously a lot of it must have been true, all of the, backstory with the US and all that. What was your approach?
Well, all of the facts, I mean, this is like when you write a historical novel, you're kind of writing a mystery because you have the facts and you want all the facts to be right on 100%. You don't want to make up anything that's actually factual. But you can't really know what conversations people had or what their inner thoughts were, what their real relationships were with certain people. And there's a lot about sisterhood, about mothers and daughters. So that conversations and thoughts, I had to invent some of them. So, that is kind of what I've done before when writing historical novels. So I just tried to stay as true to the story as possible. And the other thing that was really difficult that I didn't imagine when I quickly said yes without thinking was that, Anne's voice is like, I feel is the best first person narration in literature. And so I didn't feel like I could write a first person story. Mm-hmm. So I had to figure out a way to get inside of her while, also maintaining a certain distance from her.
Interesting. Wow. The events of the days before and all of the hopes and dreams and, as you said, the sibling relationships and mother-daughter relationships. How did you, I know we have learned, all of us, so much from reading the diary, and I feel like I know her and I know her family and all of that. But even things like how strict her mom was or why her mom was strict, or so some of the motivations, not strict, but more, really wanting her to succeed. Some of the motivations, which I feel like you laid out really clearly in the book. Did you imagine? I mean, I know these are silly questions, but...
No, they were really important. That's exactly what was important to me in writing it because, yes, I did research and I worked a lot with the Anne Frank House and the historians there were great and extremely helpful. But things like, the emotional connections between people, I could only guess at from what other people said and from writings, from Anne's writings and from what other people said. And so what I gathered and what people seem to believe is that, her sister was kind of the perfect girl. Mm-hmm. She was beautiful and she was smart and she, stuck by the rules and she did as she was told. And Anne was more difficult and had more of kind of like more difficulties with her mother who wanted her to behave. And that wasn't who Anne was. She was creative and she was bossy and she was a lot of things that made me love her even more
Yep.
as I was researching her.
Wow. It's almost, I started wondering a little bit, like, I wonder if Anne actually had ADHD or something. It's possible.
You just never know about historical figures. But one of the things that happened to me is when I read it for the first time when I was 12,
Hmm.
really felt what you had said before was that I knew her.
Hmm.
I think that happens with really great books is that it's not just that you feel like you know the other person, but you also feel like somehow she knows you. Like
Hmm.
you're having such similar feelings and thoughts. And
Yes.
so I felt about the diary and I felt this connection and it made me feel like I could be a writer, which is something that I never imagined before.
So do you remember like where you were when you read the book the first time?
I don't remember where I was, but I'm sure I was at home, in my mother's house. And I believe that I bought it at a book fair, at
Huh.
a scholastic book fair. And I just, I didn't know very much about history. I didn't know very much about World War II, even though my father had served in World War II. He never spoke about it. It seemed like it was very far away, but it really wasn't from the time that I read it to the ending of World War II and from the Holocaust. So it was just a huge entree into kind of another person's life. And I think that's the thing about reading is that it gives you such compassion for other people. I think that's what scares people when they want to ban books is that when you're a reader, you just have more compassion and you can imagine what it's like to live somebody else's life.
Yep. And when you told the story, she was younger than I remembered her. Like, I feel like I remember her more as like 12, 13, and yet
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, like, I have a son now who's 9 and a daughter who's 11, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, the ages seem different theoretically than,
right. It's
you know,
different. Well, this is before, so it starts when she's about 9 years old.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that is so young. And one of the things when I first started writing the book, my niece now is 14, but when I first started, she was about 11 and a half, and she lived in Austria and she'd never heard of Anne Frank. And I thought, oh, so like I'm writing this book for you, and she's like, I don't think we study that until later, but I just thought like, how could she not know? How
Yeah.
could, like we can't let Anne disappear. And the further we get from the Holocaust, the fewer people, the fewer survivors there are, the easier it is to forget that story. And when you go to the Anne Frank house, I'm sure you've been there. It's
It's
just an incredible experience. And I think it's, one of them, I think it is the number one place, the visitors place for people who are coming from outside of the Netherlands. And it's just such an experience and such an emotional experience to go there. And I remember going there, years and years and years ago. It's changed and it's become more of a museum, less of their house. And it's just a fascinating place to go. I really think it also keeps the memory alive about what can happen so
yes.
easily and so quickly.
And just how like tight quarters it really was for so many of
Yeah.
the people. I mean, I've been twice. I went once in high school and then again very recently and brought my own kids back, which was really moving.
Oh,
And I starred as Anne Frank in the Diary of Anne Frank in my camp play, I'll have you know. Yes.
okay.
Yeah, yep. It was my shining moment. I was very proud to be cast, but I really felt, and I always have felt, like so much in common with like the young girl sort of writing her feelings down and all of that. Like, I mean, I know all of us writers probably feel the same thing. Like, this could easily be us and what it must have been, and even her first crush, and just all of it. And I think in your book too, learning about what came before, and just the carefree nature and how fast it can all change, which is something that I feel like we're all reeling from right now. Just
Uh,
where are we in the history of what's happening now? Are we at the beginning?
right. You don't really know till you reach the end of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the most emotional experiences for me was when I went to Amsterdam. I went to the family's apartment before they moved into the annex or the attic. And now it's a place where they let writers stay, writers who can't write in their own countries.
Hmm.
And they asked me if I wanted to stay, but I felt too emotional to stay there.
Hmm.
And even spending a few hours there because it just felt like home. It
Hmm.
just felt like someone's home. And the neighborhood is a really nice neighborhood. And the bookstore where she bought the diary still exists. And there are kids running all over. And you kind of are transported to that time where everything seemed normal
Mm-hmm.
right before the Nazis arrived. And it was a very emotional experience to be there.
My
And then
gosh.
to go to her school. I also went to her school that still,
Wow.
she went to a Montessori school, and the same tree was in the yard. Her desk was still there, and it just makes you feel closer to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like that's the magic of telling one story is so much more powerful than thinking like, oh, millions of Jews were killed. It's like you
Yes.
get
Yeah.
yourself into this and you're like, oh, like this is really it. This is what was lost
You
times and
know, you are so right, Zibby, because it makks it so personal.
Mhm.
And I met with a researcher when I was there who researched diaries and also hidden people. There were so many people who were hidden, and
Mhm.
so many people who wrote diaries. And it wasn't, just one person, but somehow knowing this one person so well makes you kind of feel for everybody who was in that circumstance.
Yeah. My gosh. What do you feel like after this whole deep dive? What do you feel that you didn't feel before, either about Anne or about resilience or times in history or what we should not forget or any of that? Like, where do you feel like you are now versus before you started the project?
Well, I feel like, the idea of somebody who could still have hope and faith and still think that people are good, still be so positive, still be a dreamer. I mean, part of that, it was her age. And
Hmm.
that's kind of how, when we're young, we can feel those things. And it's kind of good to remember those things as we get older, because it's so easy to become cynical and to feel like there is no hope. And so I think that was a big part of it for me in rereading everything.
I was so honestly taken aback when you said, not take, I mean, just so surprised when you said that Scholastic was worried that people were forgetting the diary. I almost like didn't even have anything to say. I was like, what? Is that even possible? Like, is this not in the common parlance? Like in my community, I feel like it is, but in the larger scale, like, has it really been fading? And how sad is that? I mean, that is
Um,
devastating to me.
yeah, I think it's just really important to remember her and to remember everything that happened. So that was one of the reasons I, immediately wanted to write the book. But I also wanted to write it, and I didn't even think about it or think about all the work or think about anything. I just felt like this is the book that my grandmother would have wanted me to write. And I just feel like if I don't write anything else, then I did this for her, because I just think it would have really mattered for her to have that story out there. So
What was your family story?
my family were Russian, and my grandmother told me about her life, but it just sounded like a fairy tale. I couldn't believe how she had lived. That being afraid of wolves in the morning when she had to go down to the river to get water, and I just feel like her story is just kind of an immigrant story, and I just think this is something she would have wanted me to do.
It's really meaningful and really good too. I mean, in terms of writing and creating narrative and tension and just all the crafty stuff, what are some tools of the trade that you feel like you rely on a lot or that you make sure to do when you're writing? I mean, you're such an accomplished author. Like,
Thank
what is it
you.
you do to get is it the outlining? Is it character development? Like, what is the secret sauce?
Zibby, to be honest, I think I block it all out afterwards, kind of like childbirth. Like if you remembered what it was like, you'd never do it again. It's that feeling. I do make a lot of outlines. I do a lot of different drafts. I worked with a great editors, and that was really helpful. But I realized when I was writing this particular story that for me, it was so horrible and so upsetting that the only way I could really tell it was to tell it as if it were a fairy tale.
Hmm.
Because I always felt growing up that fairy tales allow you to see into the darkness and the light both in a way that realistic stories don't. And so I felt like I had to do both, give the facts, tell what really happened, but also tell it as if it were a fairy tale so that we would understand like two sisters who were lost in the woods, and that would resonate for people as they were reading it. And for younger, I do feel like it's for everybody, like every age, but for younger readers, I didn't want to put so much history in that it would turn them off.
Hmm.
So I realized a way where I could say everything that was happening in kind of a condensed form so that it wouldn't stop them from reading the story as a story.
I was sort of surprised when Anne's dad was talking about how safe he felt in the Netherlands, and that when things started to happen, how he said, "Oh no, well, people will know that this is wrong. This is against the rules, and someone will come in and tell Germany they
Right.
can't do this. Like this is not what they're supposed to do, so it couldn't possibly get worse." And it's just that it's like suspension of disbelief or something, that you feel like people will do the right thing, and what if they don't?
Yeah, I know. He really did believe people would do the right thing. And one of the things, this is just like a quirk of like circumstance, but I rent this little tiny place to write in, and I'm there right now. And it turned out that the person who owned the house was from the Strauss family. And Otto was very friendly with that family and introduced me to the woman who ran the historical family archives, who was very helpful to me also. That just seemed like another reason, like I'm supposed to do this, because what are the odds of that happening? Pretty
Wow.
slim. So that was really lucky.
Oh my gosh. And what other projects are you working on, if anything, in the midst of all of this? Do you have more adult things coming, or what's on your dance card?
I do. I'm working on a novel. I tend not to talk exactly about it, novels, because you never know if that's going to be the novel, as you know, until you're at the end. I mean, maybe you're going to throw it out.
Yep.
All last year, I was in a master's program at the Divinity School at Harvard. So I relearned how to write a paper and do a lot of reading. So I'm recovering from that.
Why did you do that?
Well, it turned out to be interesting in terms of the Anne Frank book, but I write a lot about religion and philosophy and history, and it just seemed like a good place for me to take a minute and breathe and do some research.
Hmm.
And from that, I kind of found a novel that I'm working on. So that was a good move for
So it was
me.
all worth
It was that. Yeah, it was worth
it.
it. And there's the possibility of practical magic being a movie. There being a practical magic too, so that's very exciting. And I'm just writing.
Amazing. And what types of things are you reading? And what did you read any other books about Anne Frank as you were doing your research that you hadn't read before, or about that period of time, or other historical novels, or anything that you're like, people should read this too, that maybe they missed, or anything like that?
I did mostly research, historical research. I stayed away from novels. To tell you the truth, I stay away from novels when I'm writing a novel because I don't want to be influenced in any way. And so I tend to do more research in my reading. Unfortunately, I don't know if you find this, but I find that the more you write, the less you read. And so I'm really looking forward to reading Elizabeth Strout's new book. That's what I'm excited about. But I'm mostly writing right now and reading historical information.
What do you think about the situation today, not in terms of political things, but in terms of the fear that many Jewish people are feeling in response to last year's attacks and the rise in anti-Semitism now versus, when we look back and see how it was building there, and now it's so well documented how it all built and the laws that were changing and all of that. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about today?
Well, it's interesting. I feel that it was a really good time to write about Anne Frank, that I didn't expect all of these things to be happening, last year and this year, but that in reading about her and writing about her, it was really helpful for me to understand that this is a very old situation, a very ancient situation, and something that, people have to deal with and have dealt with continuously. And I don't know, people can be really disappointing in a lot of ways. And I think in writing about Anne, it kind of helped me to renew my faith that in the end, that there would be good people.
That's great. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Well, I think the best advice is that you have to write. Like nothing can happen if you don't write. And even if you write a novel and you realize it's not the right novel, the more you write, the better you get, I think. And also, I used to do this. I don't do it as much. I'm reminding myself, I think it's good to write and not read it for a while
Mm.
because it's so easy to be disappointed or to think it's terrible or to be ready to throw it away. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first. And I think it's also good to have readers who are supportive at first so that you want to keep going. Because there's so many people who want to write, but they never exactly do it or they never exactly finish. And it is kind of daunting and it's a lot of work. And, the other thing is that I think sometimes people don't know is that so many writers rewrite, 20, 30 times a manuscript. So it doesn't happen all at once.
Very true. Good advice. Definitely might need that. I just finished my latest novel and I literally started 2 other ones and I had a 60-page outline and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do this other thing over here. And
maybe you'll use that material for something else at some point, or maybe it will come back in some way.
Oh yeah, I did not delete it. I put it in like a separate folder. I'm like, even if I could use a paragraph, it'll be good.
No, never delete.
Never delete. Oh my goodness. Okay. And do you keep a diary? Just wondering. Do you ever keep a diary?
No.
No.
I've never kept a diary.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm not that interested in my own real life. So,
the diary of Alice Hoffman, not to be. Okay.
not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, Alice, thank you so much. Thank you for writing this book. Even though Scholastic came to you and it wasn't like some grand vision, I think it's amazing that you said yes right away, delved deep into it, used your skill to bring this really special girl back to life. And it's really important and really amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Zibby. And I have to say, I was so honored to be asked to do it. I never thought that would happen to me. So I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
You too. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.